The flashbulbs were blinding, but not as blinding as Arthur Vance's hubris. On the night of his 20th anniversary, from the stage of the opulent Astra Tower he believed he built, he raised a crystal glass. But the toast wasn't to his wife, Eleanor. It was a eulogy for her relevance. He called her his anchor, a word that sounded like a compliment, but was delivered like a sentence. He smirked as the crowd tittered, soaking in the spotlight. He had no idea that this anchor wasn't just holding him steady. She was the one who had designed the harbour, built the fleet, and charted the maps. And he had just given her the signal to scuttle his ship. The Astra Tower's grand ballroom was a monument to Arthur Vance's ego. Soaring 50 stories above the city, the room was a symphony of glass and brushed steel, with panoramic views that made the skyline look like a carpet of diamonds. Tables were draped in silver linen, each bearing an impossible sculpture of orchids and white roses. The guest list was a calculated roster of power. Mayor David Chen was schmoozing by the champagne fountain. Senator Harrison was in a deep, head-nodding conversation with a rival developer, Ethan Reed, and scattered throughout were the bankers, lawyers, and media figures that made up Arthur's world. Arthur Vance moved through this crowd not like a host, but like a monarch. His suit was a custom Tom Ford, his smile was 1,000 watts, and his handshakes were firm and proprietary. He was at the absolute peak of his life, and this 20th anniversary gala was less a celebration of his marriage and more a coronation of his success. And then there was Eleanor. Eleanor Vance was a study in quiet contrast. While Arthur was a supernova, she was the calm, dark space between the stars. She wore a deep emerald gown, elegant and timeless, but it was designed to deflect, not attract, attention. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple chignon. She was standing near a marble pillar, observing. She watched Arthur work the room, a faint, unreadable expression on her face. She saw him laugh, a booming sound, as he clapped the shoulder of a banker. She saw the new, ambitious head of communications, Serafina Hayes, drift toward him. Serafina was everything Eleanor was not. She was a blaze of scarlet silk, her blonde hair perfectly tousled, her laugh just a little too loud. She was new, hired 3 months prior, and had already made herself indispensable to Arthur, whispering in his ear, managing his public image, and, as the whispers in the office suggested, much more. Arthur finally spotted Eleanor. He strode over, the crowd parting for him like the Red Sea. He pecked her cheek, a dry, papery gesture that smelled of expensive whiskey. "There you are, Ellie," he said, his voice loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Trying to blend in with the flora again? You should be mingling. This is a party, after all. Our party." "I am mingling, Arthur. I was just speaking with Mr. Henderson about the zoning for the new waterfront project," Eleanor replied, her voice soft but clear. Arthur waved a dismissive hand. "Zoning. Always the details. Leave the boring parts to the lawyers, darling. Tonight, you're supposed to be the queen." He said the word queen, but it sounded like an accusation, as if she were failing at the role. He didn't notice that while he spoke, Eleanor had subtly motioned to a catering captain. She pointed discreetly at Senator Harrison's table, where the senator was looking in vain for a waiter. A moment later, a bottle of 98 Lafitte, the senator's private preference, a detail Eleanor had logged in her mental database, appeared at his elbow. The senator beamed. Arthur, meanwhile, had already turned away, drawn by Serafina's radiant smile. "Arthur, darling," Serafina purred, linking her arm through his. "The press from the Financial Times is here. They want a word about the Q4 projections." "Ah, exactly," Arthur said, puffing his chest. He gave Eleanor a final look. "You see, Ellie, the Empire never sleeps. Try to. Enjoy yourself." He let Serafina lead him away, his hand lingering on the small of her back. Eleanor watched them go. She did not look hurt. She did not look angry. She looked like an engineer watching a complex piece of machinery begin to spark, a critical failure imminent. She turned her gaze to Marcus Cole, the company's longtime CFO. Marcus was a quiet, unassuming man with steel-grey hair and an accountant's sober demeanor. He was standing alone, nursing a club soda. He caught Eleanor's eye from across the room and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was a nod of loyalty, of shared knowledge. He knew exactly who had really spoken to Henderson about the waterfront zoning. He knew who had built the financial models for the Q4 projections Arthur was about to boast about. He, and perhaps he alone in this entire room, knew that Eleanor Vance was not the woman standing in Arthur's shadow. She was the one who had built the tower casting it. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. Arthur's personal assistant, a young, eager man named Robert, tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to welcome the man of the hour, the visionary who rebuilt this city's skyline, and the host of this wonderful evening, Mr. Arthur Vance." The room erupted in applause. Arthur practically jogged to the stage, soaking in the adoration. He took the microphone, his smile blinding. He scanned the room, his eyes landing first on Serafina in the front row, and then, almost as an afterthought, on Eleanor, who had remained by her pillar. "Thank you, Robert," Arthur began, his voice like velvet. "Thank you all for being here. 20 years. 20 years. He paused for dramatic effect. The speech was about to begin. Arthur held the microphone like a scepter. The room was his. 20 years ago, he began, his voice resonating with practiced charisma. I was a young man with a dream. I had $5,000 in a checking account, a suit I'd rented, and an idea. An idea that this city, our beautiful city, could be more. That we could reach for the sky. And look at us now. He gestured to the window, to the glittering city 50 stories below. The crowd applauded on cue. He was a master conductor, and they were his orchestra. People talk about success, he continued, and they talk about vision. They talk about drive. And I'll be the first to admit, I have those things. He laughed, and the crowd laughed with him. But they also say, behind every great man, there is a great woman. He paused, and the spotlight swung, finding Eleanor by the pillar. She stood perfectly still, her face a pale oval in the harsh light. Arthur's smile tightened, becoming less of a smile and more of a baring of teeth. And Eleanor, well, Eleanor was there. She was there from the beginning. Weren't you, darling? The tone was wrong. It wasn't appreciative. It was condescending. The air in the room grew thin. Mayor Chen shifted uncomfortably. They say that, but this is the 21st century, Arthur went on, a strange, cruel energy rising in him. He was performing now, not just for the crowd, but for Serafina, who was watching him with undisguised adoration. In the modern age, shouldn't the woman be, well, standing beside him? Or at least keeping up? A nervous titter went through the room. Ethan Reed, the rival developer, leaned back with a smirk, sensing blood in the water. Eleanor, Arthur said, raising his glass directly to her, has always been my anchor. He let the word hang in the air. A steady, reliable anchor. Always there. Always in the same place, keeping me moored. He laughed again, a short, sharp bark. But you can't build an empire from the harbor, can you? An empire is built by sailing. It needs wind in its sails. It needs dynamism. It needs people who understand the speed of now. He then did the unforgivable. He turned his body and his toast away from his wife of 20 years, and aimed it directly at the front table. It needs new blood, new energy. People like our brilliant, dynamic, new head of communications, Serafina Hayes. She understands vision. She understands me. To the future, Serafina. He drank. Serafina, beaming, rose slightly from her seat and raised her glass back to him. The camera flashes were epileptic. They weren't focused on Arthur anymore. They were focused on Eleanor. They were vultures, capturing the precise moment of her execution. But Eleanor Vance didn't cry. She didn't flush with shame or rage. Her face remained pale, her expression unreadable. Her spine, visible against the emerald silk of her gown, seemed to be forged from high tensile steel. For a full 10 seconds, she held the gaze of the room, held the flash of the cameras. Then, with a devastating, regal calm, she placed her untouched champagne flute on the tray of a passing waiter. She did not look at Arthur. She did not look at Serafina. She turned, and with measured, unhurried steps, she walked away from the pillar, across the vast, silent ballroom, and through the grand double doors. The click, click, click of her heels on the marble floor was the only sound in the room. The doors swung shut behind her with a soft whoosh. The silence that followed was absolute. Arthur, still on stage, faltered. The drunken, arrogant high was evaporating, replaced by a cold prickle of something. Confusion? Annoyance? Well, he stammered, trying to recapture the moment. She was probably just tired. A long night. Anyway, to Vance Global, and to the next 20 years. He raised his glass again, but the applause was sparse, mechanical. The spell was broken. He had gone too far. He hadn't just insulted his wife, he had shown himself to be a fool. Across the room, Clarissa Dunn, the formidable CEO of Blackwood Capital, a key investor, stood up, gathered her wrap, and walked out without a word. Arthur didn't see it. He was too busy forcing a smile, blinded by the spotlight he craved, completely unaware that his world had just been unplugged. Arthur woke the next morning to the merciless glare of the sun filtering through his penthouse blinds. His head felt like a split watermelon, pulsing with a dull, whiskey-soaked rhythm. His first emotion was not remorse, it was irritation. "Eleanor," he mumbled, reaching across the vast, empty California King. "Get Robert on the phone. Tell him to move my 10 o'clock." The sheets beside him were cold. He sat up, groaning. The events of the party came back to him in fuzzy, unpleasant snapshots. The speech, the toast, Eleanor walking out. "Damn it," he muttered. So dramatic. Making a scene, all because of a little joke. He swung his legs out of bed, convinced that this was just another of Eleanor's quiet moods. He'd apologize, a breezy, "Sorry you were so sensitive, darling," and she would get over it. She always did. He dressed, bypassing the suit his valet had laid out, and opted for a more casual, in-command look. Charcoal trousers and a crisp blue shirt, sleeves already rolled up. He was in damage control mode, not because he felt guilty, but because he knew the optics were bad. Serafina would have to handle the press. He stepped out of his private elevator into the lobby of the Vance Global building. He walked toward the executive turnstiles, reserved for him and his C-suite. He swiped his all-access keycard. Beep, beep. Access denied. Arthur frowned. He swiped it again. Beep, beep. Access denied. A security guard he didn't recognize looked over. "Problem, sir?" "This damn card," Arthur growled. "It's malfunctioning. You'll have to sign in at the front desk, sir, and use the public elevators." Arthur's face purpled. "Sign in? Do you have any idea who I am?" "Policy, sir," the guard said, unmoved. Fuming, Arthur stomped to the main reception, was forced to show his driver's license like a common salesman, and endured the indignity of the crowded public elevator, which stopped at 3 different floors. By the time he reached his office on the 49th floor, he was a storm cloud ready to burst. His assistant, Robert, leaped from his desk, his face pale. "Mr. Vance, good morning, sir. Get it up here now to fix my keycard and get me a coffee," Arthur snapped, storming into his cavern-sized corner office. "And where the hell is Eleanor? Is she in her office?" Eleanor had a small, functional office on the 45th floor, near the finance department. Arthur rarely visited it. I don't know, sir. She hasn't been in," Robert stammered, following him. "Mr. Vance, there's a problem. You're 10 a.m. with the Blackwood Capital team." "Ah, right. The Meridian deal." "Good." Arthur sat behind his massive mahogany desk. "Tell them I'll be ready. This'll be the biggest deal of the decade." "Sir, it's been cancelled." Arthur froze. "What did you say?" "Cancelled, sir." "We got an email at 8:01 a.m. from Clarissa Dunn's personal office. I printed it for you." Robert handed him a single sheet of paper. It was brutally short. "Mr. Vance, in light of last night's events, Blackwood Capital is postponing our involvement in Project Meridian indefinitely, pending a full internal review of our partnership with Vance Global. Regards, C. Dunn." "Postponed? Indefinitely? What events?" Arthur roared. "It was a party. Get Clarissa on the phone, now." "Her assistant said she's unavailable, for the week." "Then get Marcus Cole in here." Arthur slammed his fist on the desk. "He'll fix this. He'll call her. They're old friends or something." "Mr. Cole isn't in, sir," Robert said, wringing his hands. "He's not answering his office line or his cell. His assistant just said he's off-site, auditing the assets." "Auditing what?" At 9 in the morning, Arthur felt the first real spike of cold fear. Marcus was never unavailable. He was the most reliable, boringly predictable man Arthur knew. Just then, Serafina Hayes swept into the office, not bothering to knock. She was wearing a tight, professional white dress and looked perfectly fresh. "Arthur, darling, the press is difficult," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. "They're all running with the anchor quote. It's trending. But don't worry, I have a plan. We'll release a statement about your shared passion for maritime metaphors and—" "Shut up, Serafina!" Arthur snapped. She recoiled. "What?" "I'm not worried about the press," he lied. "Blackwood just pulled the Meridian deal. That's a $200 million project. I need to see the file. I need to see where our exposure is." He toggled his computer, clicking the icon for the company's internal server. He navigated to the Strategic Projects folder. He clicked Project Meridian. The folder was empty. "What? Robert, where is the Meridian file?" "I don't know, sir. It was there on Friday." "Then find it." Arthur started clicking frantically. He tried the Acquisitions folder. Empty. Zoning Contracts. Empty. Investor Proposals. Empty. "Sir," Robert said, his voice trembling, "the entire strategic drive, it's empty." Arthur stared at the screen. This was not a glitch. This was an attack. "Find out what she did," Arthur said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. Serafina looked confused. "What, who did? The press? A rival?" Arthur's eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw not a charismatic leader, but a cornered animal. "Eleanor. Find out what Eleanor did." The panic that had started as a cold spike now became a full-blown Arctic current, flooding Arthur's veins. "Get David Kim in here," Arthur commanded, referring to the head of his IT department. "Lock down the building. I want to know who accessed that server." "Mr. Kim is already on his way, sir," Robert said, his face ashen. He He called me. He said it's a level 1 event." A moment later, David Kim, a man who usually looked perpetually stressed, burst in. He looked like he hadn't slept. "Mr. Vance, it's not a hack," Kim said, bypassing all pleasantries. "We've been monitoring the logs since 6 a.m. There's no external breach." "Then what is it? Where are my files?" "They're not just gone, Mr. Vance. The entire virtual server, the Atlas drive, which holds all strategic data, it's been migrated. The data was transferred, and the drive was then digitally decommissioned." "Migrated? Migrated where? Who authorized it?" David Kim swallowed. He was holding a tablet. "That's the problem, sir. The authorization came from the root administrator account, the one that supersedes even your own." Arthur was baffled. "I am the root administrator. My password is Astra King 49. David Kim winced at the terrible password. "No, sir. You have a Tier A admin account. But there's always one root account, the one that created the system. We've never had to access it. It's just been there. The user ID is encrypted. It's just 2 letters." "Which 2? Arthur demanded. "EK." Arthur stared. "EK?" It meant nothing to him. "Who is EK? Find them." "I can't," David said, his voice rising in panic. "The account is secured with a 256-bit encryption key that's not stored on our system. It's on a physical hardware token. And that's not all. The Atlas server itself. The physical hardware, it's not even in the building." "What do you mean it's not in the building? I paid $1 million for that server room." "The old servers are there, sir. The ones we use for email and daily operations. But the Atlas system, I've tracked the work order. It was a proprietary Blade server. It was installed in 2007 by a private contractor. According to this," he tapped his tablet, "it was physically removed from the premises at 4:15 this morning by a bonded tech team. The work order was signed by Marcus Cole." Marcus. It all came back to Marcus and EK. Arthur's mind was racing, trying to connect dots that wouldn't. EK. He remembered a joke decades ago in their first tiny one-bedroom apartment. Eleanor had been poring over blueprints, a textbook on structural engineering beside her. He'd been frustrated, wanting to go out. "You and your books," he'd scoffed. "You're like the keystone of this whole boring operation." She had smiled, a rare, private smile. "The keystone holds everything up, Arthur. Don't forget that. Eleanor Keystone." It was the name of the dummy corporation she'd set up to hold the patent for a small software she'd written, something about property taxes. He'd thought it was a cute hobby. His blood ran cold. Atlas. That was the name of the software. It wasn't just a server drive, it was her software. The proprietary algorithm that analyzed zoning laws, demographic shifts, and material costs. The system he took credit for in Forbes, calling it his instinct, digitized. He always assumed his IT team had built it. He scrambled for his phone, his hands shaking. He didn't call Marcus. He called his personal lawyer, Stephen Grant. "Stephen, thank God. I need you to file an injunction. Now, Eleanor, she's stealing from me." There was a long, cold silence on the other end of the line. "Stephen, did you hear me?" "I heard you, Arthur." Stephen's voice was flat, devoid of its usual collegial warmth. "Well, get it done. She's locked me out of my own company. She and Marcus Cole." "Arthur," Stephen said, and his voice was heavy. "I'm afraid I can't do that. As of 9 a.m. this morning, my firm no longer represents Vance Global. Or you, personally." "What? I've had you on retainer for 15 years. "Yes, and I've always appreciated the business. But a conflict of interest has arisen." "What conflict?" My firm has, for 20 years, held the charter for Keystone Holdings LLC. My primary fiduciary duty is to that client. And as of this morning, Keystone has called in its primary operational loan to Vance Global Properties. Arthur sank into his chair. He couldn't feel his legs. What loan? We're liquid. We're fine. No, Arthur, you're not. You're heavily leveraged. You always have been. You've been funding your acquisitions, your payroll, even this building, through a revolving line of credit extended by Keystone Holdings. You signed the original agreement in 2005, the one you famously told me you didn't have time to read, because you had a tea time. You just wanted to know where to sign. Arthur was suffocating. Keystone, that's my holding company. I control it. No, Arthur, Stephen said, and the pity in his voice was like acid. You never did. You are the CEO of Vance Global, a C Corp. You own 10% of the voting shares. The other 90%, the controlling interest, has always been held by Keystone Holdings, and the sole signatory, the sole owner and beneficiary of that blind trust, is Eleanor Keystone Vance. I'm sorry, Arthur. Your company is in default. As of this moment, it's insolvent. Don't sign anything. The line clicked dead. Arthur sat in the silence. Serafina and Robert were staring at him, their faces masks of terror. His company wasn't his office wasn't his life wasn't his. It all belonged to E.K. It all belonged to Eleanor. Arthur Vance moved like a ghost. He pushed past the stunned Serafina and Robert, left his office, and took the public elevator down. He didn't know where he was going. He was on autopilot, his mind a roaring void. He drove his Bentley, one of the few things he owned outright, towards their Greenwich estate. He needed to find her. He needed to what? Yell? Beg? When he reached the 20-foot-high wrought-iron gates, he punched in his security code. Invalid code. Access denied. He hammered the keypad again. Invalid code. He sat in his car, staring at the house he'd bought for her, and realized he was locked out. The humiliation from the guard at the office was nothing. This was a total, systematic erasure. He got out of the car, his legs unsteady. He found a section of the stone wall that was lower and, in his $2,000 suit, ignominiously climbed over it, ripping the fabric. He stumbled onto the perfectly manicured lawn and ran to the front door. It was locked. He used the spare key, hidden under a stone planter. It slid into the lock but wouldn't turn. The locks had been changed. Crying out in a raw animal sound of rage and despair, he ran around the back to the patio. The sliding glass door was, mercifully, unlocked. He stepped inside. The house was cavernously empty, but it wasn't empty of furniture. His massive, gaudy sofas were still there. His trophies for Developer of the Year were still on the shelves. His 8-foot-tall portrait in the foyer was still hanging. Her things were gone. The abstract, challenging paintings she loved were gone, leaving pale squares on the walls. His hunting scenes and portraits of himself remained. Her vast collection of first-edition architecture and philosophy books was gone from the library. Only his thrillers and business biographies were left. Her office, usually a cluttered creative space, was sterile. The desk was clear. The computers were gone. All her clothes were gone from the vast walk-in closet. All her jewelry from the safe. All that was left was his own sprawling, disorganized mess. He had built a shrine to himself, and she had simply evacuated. She had taken her life out of his, leaving him alone with the empty, vulgar shell he had created. On the massive, cold marble island in the kitchen, an island he'd insisted on, though she'd said it was impossibly impractical, was a single plain white envelope. His name, Arthur, was written on it in her precise architectural script. His hands were shaking so violently he could barely open it. He expected a letter, a torrent of anger, a heartbroken plea. Inside was no letter, just a single plastic keycard. It was a simple white card with no logo. On it, written in the same black marker, was an address, 1124, Birch Street, 6th floor. He knew the address. It was the first office space they had ever rented, 2 decades ago. A tiny 3-room suite in a run-down, pre-war brick building downtown, in a neighborhood that hadn't gentrified yet. He'd hated the place. It was cramped, the heating was unreliable, and it smelled like dust. He'd insisted they move into a glass high-rise the second they'd landed their first big contract. He thought they had sold that building years ago. He drove, breaking every speed limit. He parked his Bentley on the cracked pavement of Birch Street, a stark contrast to the graffiti and an old bodega. He entered the building. The lobby was the same, worn-out terrazzo flooring, a dim, buzzing light. He found the elevator and swiped the card. The light turned green. The elevator, old and creaking, began its ascent. When it reached the 6th floor, the top floor, the doors slid open. This was not the office he remembered. The dusty, cramped suite was gone. The entire floor had been gutted. It was now a high-tech, glass-walled command center, humming with the quiet power of dozens of high-end servers. 20 people he vaguely recognized from the finance and data analysis departments at Vance Global, were working with intense, quiet focus. They were plugged into data streams he didn't recognize. The walls were covered in monitors displaying market data, architectural blueprints, and legal documents. It was a war room, and in the center of it all, at a sleek, minimalist standing desk, was Eleanor. She was not the wallpaper wife from the party. She was wearing a tailored navy blue pantsuit. Her hair was pulled back tightly. She was on the phone, a wireless earpiece in. She held a stylus, making notes on a large touch screen that showed the floor plan of the Meridian project. Marcus Cole was standing beside her, pointing to a data point on a screen. She finished her call. "No, tell Clarissa the capital is secure. We are exercising Article 4 of the partnership agreement. The Vance brand is compromised. We are moving all assets, patents, and contracts to the new entity. Effective immediately. Yes. Meridian. It's done." She clicked off the call and finally, turned her eyes to Arthur. Her gaze was not angry. It was not sad. It was diagnostic. It was the look she'd given the cracked foundation of a building they were assessing. She was judging his structural integrity and finding him wanting. "Arthur," she said, her voice echoing in the high-tech space. "You're late. But that's not new." "Eleanor," he breathed, the word torn from him. "What is this? What have you done?" "I'm glad you asked," she said, stepping out from behind the desk. "You're here to listen. You will not interrupt." "Marcus, will you make sure he doesn't interrupt?" Marcus Cole, a man Arthur had always considered a harmless bean counter, stepped forward. He looked formidable. "Sit down, Arthur," Marcus said. It was not a request. Arthur, his legs giving out, collapsed into a steel and leather chair. The execution was about to begin. Eleanor walked to the front of the room, standing before a large, blank smart screen. She tapped it, and it lit up with a timeline. "You're a man who loves stories, Arthur," she began, her voice cold and even, like a lecturer's. "Especially your own. The man with $5,000 and a dream. It's a great story. Compelling. But it's fiction. Now, You will listen to the truth." She pointed to the start of the timeline, year 2005. 20 years ago, you had $5,000 and a rented suit. She tapped the screen, and a bank statement appeared, had $2.4 million in a trust, an inheritance from my grandmother, a woman who believed in women's education and shrewd investments. You had charisma. I had a dual degree in systems engineering and finance from Wharton. Arthur opened his mouth, but a look from Marcus silenced him. "We made an agreement, Arthur. Do you remember? In that tiny apartment on Birch Street, right here on this floor. You said, 'Ellie, I can sell. I can be the face. You're no good with people. You're too quiet.' And you were right. I hated the schmoozing. I just wanted to build. So we made a deal." She advanced the timeline. "I founded Keystone Holdings, LLC. I used my inheritance to provide 100% of the seed capital for a new company, Vance Global Properties. You were given a 10% stake and the title of CEO. Your job was to be the face, the brand. My job was to do everything else." The screen changed. It showed the code for the Atlas program. "This," she said, "is Atlas, my postgraduate thesis. It's not a property analysis tool, you fool. It's a predictive economic modeling system. It analyzes demographic shifts, zoning law precedents, materials futures, and political sentiment to predict neighborhood growth 5, 10, and 20 years out. It's why we never lost money, even in the 2008 crash. It's why we bought in the warehouse district in 2010, when everyone else was selling. This algorithm, this ghost in the machine, is the entire engine of Vance Global, and it belongs exclusively to Keystone Holdings." She kept clicking. Financial charts appeared. Every loan, every line of credit, every bold acquisition you took credit for. It was all financed internally by Keystone. You weren't a risk-taker, Arthur. You were a man on the world's most generous allowance. You were, in effect, my highest-paid employee, a mascot for the brand. "Ellie." "No," he whispered. "My name is Eleanor," she snapped, and the ice in her voice made him flinch. "You brought up Clarissa Dunn. You told Marcus to call her. Clarissa Dunn was my roommate at Wharton. She didn't invest in Vance Global. She invested in me. The Blackwood Capital deal was contingent on my personal oversight." "Marcus?" Marcus Cole stepped forward. "I was hired by Eleanor in 2007. My employment contract, my loyalty, and my non-disclosure agreement are with Keystone Holdings, not Vance Global. For 18 years, I have managed 2 sets of books, the public-facing ones for Vance Global and the private, consolidated ones for Keystone." You lied to me," Arthur said, his voice cracking. "All of you." "Did we?" Eleanor walked closer to him. "Or did you simply stop seeing me? Did you stop asking? When was the last time you asked me about the boring details, Arthur? 10 years ago? 15? You were too busy accepting awards, posing for magazines, and entertaining new blood, like Miss Hayes." The mention of Serafina hit him like a slap. "I loved you," she said, and for the first time, a flicker of the old Eleanor, the quiet woman at the party, was in her voice. It was raw pain. And it worked. I didn't mind the background. I just wanted to build. I was proud of what we built. But then you started to believe it. You started to believe you were the visionary. You started to look at me, the woman who designed and financed the stage you were standing on, with contempt. You thought I was a relic, an anchor. She stood directly in front of him now, looking down at the broken man in the chair. You didn't just shame your wife at that party, Arthur. You shamed your partner, your banker, your strategist, and your boss. She turned away from him. And an anchor isn't just a weight, you arrogant fool. It's the one point of contact with solid ground. It's the only thing that stops the ship from being dashed on the rocks in a storm. And you cut the line, in front of the whole world. Arthur stumbled to his feet. The room was spinning. He was looking at a stranger. This woman, this cold, brilliant, ruthless executive, was not the Ellie he had ignored for a decade. "Eleanor, please," he begged, the word scraping his throat. It was a mistake, a stupid, drunken joke. It was the champagne. It was Serafina. She got in my head. I didn't mean it. We can fix this. I'll issue a press release. I'll tell the world the truth. That it was all you. Eleanor let out a short, harsh laugh. You'll do no such thing. Firstly, you are bound by the most ironclad, non-disclosure agreement Stephen Grant has ever written, the one you signed in 2005. If you breathe a word of Keystone's involvement, I will personally see you in prison for the rest of your life. You will not slander me, and you will not take credit for my work. But our company, it was never your company, she said, the finality in her voice crushing him. As of 9 a.m. this morning, Keystone Holdings has called in its loans. Vance Global Properties is insolvent. It's bankrupt. As the CEO, you will be named in the bankruptcy filings. The press you love so much will have a field day. Bankrupt? No. He thought of the Astra Tower. His name, his legacy. Everything. It's all gone. The debt is gone, Eleanor corrected him. Or rather, it's all been consolidated onto your books. The assets, however, are perfectly fine. The patents, the properties, the Atlas system, the client contracts, they were all collateral. And Keystone has, as of an hour ago, legally seized all of them. They have been transferred to my new holding company. She gestured to the largest screen. A logo he'd never seen flickered to life. A sleek, silver M. Meridian Strategic Properties, Eleanor announced. The new entity, all our clients, including Blackwood Capital, have already been notified. Clarissa was thrilled to hear I was finally putting my own name on the letterhead. Our key staff, she gestured to the focused team around them, have all signed their new employment contracts with Meridian. They were given the choice. They chose, wisely, to follow the architect, not the figurehead. Arthur looked around at the faces. David Kim from IT, the top data analysts. They wouldn't even look at him. They were already busy, working for her. What am I left with? He whispered, the full, horrifying scope of his oblivion finally setting in. Eleanor picked up a tablet and read from it, as if discussing a property line. You are left with the Vance Global brand, which, after the news of your spectacular public humiliation of your wife, followed by your immediate bankruptcy, is toxic and worthless. You are left with your 10% of a now-defunct company. You are left with your personal effects, and your personal debts, which are substantial. I've had a forensic accounting team on your personal expenses for 6 months. Her eyes hardened. Which brings us to Ms. Hayes. I had a severance package delivered to her apartment this morning. It included a copy of the receipts for the business trips to the Caymans, the jewelry you bought on the company card, and the lease you co-signed on her apartment. It also included a notice that Meridian Strategic will be suing her for misappropriation of corporate funds if she ever contacts you, or anyone at this company, again. I don't imagine she'll be sticking around a broke, disgraced man. She's ambitious, after all. He had nothing. He had no company, no money, no mistress, no home. The penthouse, he stammered. The house? The Greenwich estate is a Keystone asset. It's already being listed. The penthouse at the Astra Tower is in your name, but it's leveraged against the default. It will be seized by the creditors, which again is me. You have 48 hours to vacate. Robert, she said, not to him, but to his former assistant, who was now working at a terminal. Please validate Mr. Vance's parking. She turned her back on him, a final, brutal dismissal. Okay, people, Eleanor said to her new team, her voice ringing with energy. Let's get back to work. We have a $200 million deal to close. Arthur Vance stood alone in the center of the humming room, an irrelevant ghost in the machine he'd never known existed. He stumbled back to the elevator, his reflection in the glass doors showing him not a king, not a visionary, but just a man. A fool who had been given a kingdom and had torn it down, stone by stone, because he was too arrogant to see the architect who had been holding his hand and holding up the walls the entire time. He had shamed his wife, and in doing so, he had authored his own end. The creak of the old elevator descending from the 6th floor of 1124 Birch Street was the sound of Arthur Vance's world ending. He stood numbly inside the rattling metal box, his reflection a pale, ghostly mask in the scratched stainless steel door. The man staring back at him was a stranger. His custom suit was ripped at the knee from climbing his own wall. His eyes were hollow, and his face, usually so ruddy and confident, was the color of ash. When the doors opened onto the building's worn terrazzo lobby, the buzzing fluorescent light felt like an assault. He stumbled out onto the cracked pavement of the sidewalk. The city he once claimed as his own, his skyline, seemed to mock him. The skyscrapers, including his own Astra Tower in the distance, were sharp, indifferent fingers pointing at a sky that was suddenly too bright. He got into the Bentley. His hands shook so violently he dropped the keys twice. When he finally managed to start the engine, the purr of the V12, a sound that once filled him with a sense of godlike power, was now just a low, mournful noise. He had nowhere to go. He pulled out his phone, driven by a masochistic impulse. The screen lit up with a wildfire of alerts. Bloomberg. Vance Global files for Chapter 11. Bankruptcy amidst leadership collapse. Financial Times. The Vance Empire in freefall. CEO Arthur. Vance ousted. Assets seized by shadow lender. The Post. He's an anchor. Vance's anniversary speech goes viral as company implodes. The last one had a video clip attached. He didn't need to watch it. He drove. He had no destination. He was a ghost in a very expensive machine. He tried to call Serafina. He needed a voice, an ally, even a co-conspirator. The call went straight to a generic automated message. The number you have dialed has been disconnected, or is no BLOCKED. Eleanor had been right. She was gone. He tried to call his lawyer, Stephen, the firm's main line. Grant, Miller and Hayes, how may I direct your call? I need to speak to Stephen Grant. It's Arthur Vance. A click. A moment of silence. I'm sorry, sir. Mr. Grant is in a meeting. He will be unavailable indefinitely. Click. He was an island, and the tide was rising. Eventually, he found himself parked across the street from the Astra Tower, his monument, his tomb. He watched for an hour as a stream of sleek black cars pulled up. He saw Clarissa Dunn get out of one, followed by Ethan Reed, his rival. They weren't going to a party. They were walking into his building, which he now knew was her building, to meet with her. He spent that night in the back seat of his Bentley, parked in a dimly lit garage, the supple leather seats a cold, uncaring cradle. He was 55 years old, and he had nothing but the clothes on his back and a car that he'd probably have to sell by the end of the week. The visionary was a vagrant. 6 months passed. Winter had come to the city, stripping the trees bare. Arthur Vance sat in a small, furnished studio apartment above a laundromat. The room smelled of stale coffee and fabric softener. He had sold the Bentley, the Tom Ford suits, the Patek Philippe watch. He lived off the proceeds, which were dwindling with alarming speed. He was on a second-hand laptop, scrolling through a job site. He had tried to find work. He was Arthur Vance, after all. He had built an empire. But his name was not just toxic. It was a joke, a byword for hubris. In one disastrous interview for a mid-level consulting gig, the hiring manager, a man half his age, had looked at his resume and had the audacity to ask, "So, Mr. Vance, what exactly was it you did at your old company?" Arthur had no answer. He looked out his grimy window at the street below. A newsstand at the corner had a new magazine on display. He could see the cover even from here. It was Forbes, the Person of the Year issue. The cover was not a studio portrait. It was a photograph, vibrant and full of life, taken on a windswept construction site. A woman stood in the center, her dark hair pulled back under a white, hard hat. She was wearing practical boots and a tailored peacoat, and she was laughing, her head tilted back, as she reviewed a set of blueprints with a group of engineers. Her face, which he had once called plain, was the most radiant, powerful thing he had ever seen. The headline was simple: "The Architect, Eleanor Vance, on Building a Better World. Meridian Strategic Shapes the Future." He read the smaller text below it. "From the shadows of a broken empire, the true visionary emerges." Arthur let the curtain fall. He sat back on his sagging mattress, the silence of the room pressing in on him. He felt no rage. He felt no anger. That had burned out months ago, leaving nothing but a cold, hollow void. He finally understood. He wasn't the man who had lost an empire. He was just the guy who had been married to the woman who built one. He was a footnote in her story. He was, as he had so prophetically declared, the anchor, and he had been cut loose, left to sink into the silt, while her ship, light and free, finally sailed on. 50 stories above the city, in a bright, open-plan office that prioritized light and collaboration, Eleanor Vance stood at a smart screen. The Meridian Strategic logo, a subtle silver M, was projected behind her. The room was full of investors, city planners, and the entire Blackwood Capital team. "The problem with the Vance Global model," Eleanor said, her voice clear and confident, "was that it was built on a singular, toxic idea. That a building is a monument to its owner. It was about ego. It was about height. It was hollow." She clicked to a new slide, showing a stunning, green-infused design of the new Meridian project. It was not a single phallic tower, but a series of interconnected buildings, woven with public parks, affordable housing units, and sustainable energy systems. "Meridian builds for communities," she continued. "Our Atlas system isn't just predicting financial growth, it's predicting human need. We are projecting a 40% reduction in energy use, a 30% increase in access to public green space, and a 15% increase in local small business retention. We're not just building property, we're building a neighborhood." "Clarissa?" Clarissa Dunn smiled. "Meridian's numbers are the most solid I've ever seen. Blackwood is doubling our investment. We are all in." The room broke into applause. Eleanor smiled, a genuine, warm smile. Marcus Cole, now her COO, handed her a tablet. "The zoning just cleared," he murmured. "It's a green light." "Good," she said, nodding. "Excellent. Let's get to work." She looked out the window. Her window. From here, she could just see the small brick building on Birch Street, where it all began. She had kept the 6th-floor war room as a reminder of her silence and a reminder of her strength. She was not a queen. She was not a victim. She was an architect, and she was, at long, long last, just getting started. Arthur Vance learned the hard way that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. He traded a kingdom for a punchline. By the time he realized his wife wasn't just in his shadow, but that she was the one casting it, it was too late. His empire was gone. His name was a disgrace, and Eleanor Vance was on the cover of Forbes, finally credited as the silent genius he had tried to erase. It's a brutal lesson. Never mistake a partner's silence for submission or their quiet support for weakness. They just might be the ones who own the company. What did you think of Arthur's spectacular downfall? Was Eleanor's revenge justified, or was it too cold? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you loved this story and want more real-life drama, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with a friend who loves a good twist, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel. We have new stories coming for you every week. A perfect life built on a mountain of lies, a devoted wife, a billionaire husband, and a baby on the way. But on the night of their anniversary, one phone call shatters everything. His mistress is also pregnant, and the wife. She's in the next room hearing every single word. What happens when the truth comes out and two unborn children have a claim to the same fortune? This isn't just a story of infidelity. It's a story of survival revenge and the shocking lengths people will go to protect what's theirs. Stick around, because this gets messy. The air in the penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park was thick with the scent of white roses and unspoken anxieties. For Sienna Vance, every breath was a conscious effort. At 7 months pregnant, her body felt like a foreign country she was forced to inhabit. The bespoke cream-colored silk dress, designed by a name she couldn't even remember, felt more like a beautifully crafted cage than a garment. It was her 3rd wedding anniversary, and her husband, Dominic Vance, the architect of their gilded life, had promised an evening of quiet celebration. Just the two of them. Dominic was a man sculpted by ambition. At 38, he was the CEO of Vance Holdings, a name synonymous with ruthless real estate development across New York City. He moved with a predator's grace, his dark hair perfectly coiffed, his Tom Ford suit clinging to a frame honed by early morning sessions with a personal trainer. He had a smile that could disarm senators, and a gaze that could make competitors fold. To the world, he was a titan. To Sienna, he was the man who held the fragile snow globe of her life in his hands. She had met him at a charity gala 5 years ago. She was a fledgling art curator, passionate and full of dreams. He was the event's primary sponsor, a force of nature who had swept her off her feet with whirlwind dates in Paris, private yacht trips in the Mediterranean, and a proposal under the aurora borealis. He had painted a future so dazzling it blinded her to the shadows lurking at the edges. Now those shadows felt closer than ever. "You look breathtaking, my love," Dominic said, his voice a low purr as he entered the living room. He held a velvet box in his hand. "Happy anniversary." Sienna forced a smile, the gesture feeling heavy on her face. "Happy anniversary, Dominic." He opened the box to reveal a necklace of staggering proportions. A sapphire the color of a twilight sky was surrounded by a halo of brilliant cut diamonds. It was exquisite, ridiculously expensive, and felt as cold as the glass separating them from the city below. "It's beautiful," she managed, allowing him to fasten it around her neck. His fingers lingered for a moment, and she fought the urge to flinch. The intimacy that had once been the cornerstone of their relationship had become a performance, a well-rehearsed play for an audience of one. "Only the best for my wife and the mother of my son," he said, placing a kiss on her cheek. He always said, "son." The doctors had confirmed it, and for Dominic, a male heir was not just a wish. It was an expiation, another acquisition for his empire. The evening progressed with the sterile perfection of a magazine spread. A private chef prepared a multi-course meal they barely touched. The conversation was stilted, a dance around the landmines of their shared, unspoken unhappiness. Sienna spoke of the nursery, the color palettes, the tiny clothes she'd been buying. Dominic talked about a new acquisition in Soho, a historic building he planned to gut and turn into luxury lofts. "The St. Regis project is finally moving forward," he said, swirling the deep red of a vintage Bordeaux in his glass. He'd poured her a sparkling water with a slice of lime in a matching crystal goblet. "Had to grease a few palms on the city council, but that's the cost of doing business." Sienna nodded, feigning interest. She knew the truth. Greasing palms was Dominic's euphemism for threats, blackmail, and leveraging the kind of information that could ruin careers. He played the game of power with a chilling proficiency. It was during dessert, a raspberry soufflé that had long since deflated, that Dominic's phone buzzed. It was a sleek secondary phone, one Sienna knew was not for his business associates. It was his other phone. Her heart, already a heavy drum in her chest, began to beat a frantic, panicked rhythm. Dominic glanced at the screen, and for a fleeting second his mask of serene control slipped. A flicker of annoyance, quickly suppressed, crossed his features. "Excuse me for a moment, darling. It's a contractor from the London office. Time difference, you know." He rose and walked towards his study, the heavy oak doors closing behind him with a soft final click. The lie was so blatant, so insulting in its simplicity, that Sienna felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. She knew it wasn't a contractor. It was Chloe. The name a bitter taste in her mouth. She had found out about the affair 6 months ago. A credit card statement left carelessly on his desk. A charge for a boutique hotel in the West Village, followed by a purchase at a high-end lingerie store. The signs had been there for months before that the late nights, the unexplained absences, the emotional distance that had grown into a chasm between them. Sienna had confronted him. He hadn't denied it. Instead, he had been terrifyingly calm. He'd explained it away as a meaningless dalliance, a stress reliever, something that had no bearing on their life, their marriage, their future. He'd promised to end it. He'd promised, but the secret phone still buzzed. Tonight, something was different. The silence in the penthouse was deafening. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall sounded like a countdown to a detonation. Driven by an impulse she didn't fully understand, Sienna stood up, her hand instinctively going to her swollen belly. She needed to know. She needed to hear the words, to have the raw, unvarnished truth sever the last threads of hope she pathetically clung to. She padded barefoot across the cold marble floor, her silk dress whispering around her ankles. The study doors were thick but not soundproof. She pressed her ear against the cool wood, her breath catching in her throat. She could hear Dominic's voice, low and urgent, stripped of the smooth charm he used on her. "Not tonight, Chloe. I told you it's my anniversary." A pause. Sienna could almost picture the scene on the other end, Chloe, with her fiery red hair and a body sculpted for sin, probably pouting her voice, a weapon of calculated vulnerability. "What do you mean? It can't wait." Dominic's voice sharpened with impatience. "Is there a problem? Did something happen?" Another pause, longer this time. The silence stretched, pulling the air from Sienna's lungs. When Dominic spoke again, his voice was a strangled whisper, a sound she had never heard from him before. It was the sound of a man losing control. "You're what?" "Say that again." Sienna's blood ran cold. She knew. Before the next words were even spoken, a horrifying certainty settled in the pit of her stomach. Pregnant Dominic's voice cracked on the word. "No. No, that's not possible. We were careful." The world tilted on its axis. Sienna stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a sob. The floor seemed to drop away beneath her, plunging her into an icy abyss. Pregnant? The other woman, the mistress, the meaningless dalliance, was pregnant. Inside the study, Dominic's panic was escalating. "How far along?" 2 months. Are you absolutely sure it's mine?" The question hung in the air, a testament to his character. His first instinct was not concern, but doubt, a denial of responsibility. Sienna couldn't listen anymore. She backed away from the door, her vision blurring with tears. The sapphire necklace felt like a lead weight choking her. The beautiful penthouse, her gilded cage, was suddenly a prison, its walls closing in. She retreated to the living room, her movements robotic. She sank onto the plush sofa, her body trembling uncontrollably. Her mind was a maelstrom of betrayal and despair. This wasn't just an affair anymore. This was a rival claim. Another child. A Vance heir, whether Dominic wanted to admit it or not. Her own baby. Her son kicked inside her, a small, innocent life caught in the crossfire of his father's sins. For months, she had been a passive victim, a silent partner in Dominic's deceit, hoping that the birth of their child would be the anchor that saved their marriage. How naive she had been. The study door opened. Dominic emerged, his face pale, his composure shattered. He looked like a man who had seen a ghost. He saw her on the sofa, saw the tears streaming down her face, saw the raw, unfiltered agony in her eyes. The lie died on his lips. He knew that she knew. "Sienna," he began, his voice hoarse. She held up a hand, a gesture that took every ounce of her remaining strength. "Don't," she whispered, her voice trembling, but clear. "Don't you dare say another word." For the first time in their marriage, Sienna Vance was not looking at her husband. She was looking at her enemy. The battle lines had been drawn not with angry words, but with a devastating, overheard truth. And in the heart of this luxurious Manhattan penthouse, a war was about to begin. The silence that followed Sienna's command was a living entity. It filled the vast, opulent space of the penthouse, suffocating the scent of roses and the cloying sweetness of the abandoned soufflé. Dominic stood frozen halfway between the study and the living room, his face a canvas of disbelief and dawning horror. The hunter had become the hunted, caught in a trap of his own making. Sienna's gaze was unwavering. The tears had stopped, replaced by a glacial calm that was far more terrifying than any hysterical outburst. The shock had burned away the fog of her denial, leaving behind a core of foolhard fury. She saw him, not as the man she had loved, but as a stranger who had systematically dismantled her life piece by treacherous piece. You heard Dominic stated the words, flat and devoid of emotion. It wasn't a question. "I heard everything," Sienna replied, her voice low and steady. Each word was a perfectly polished stone, dropped into a still pond, its ripples spreading outwards with devastating force. "I heard you lie about a contractor. I heard you speak her name. and I heard that your meaningless dalliance is pregnant." She let the last word hang in the air, a poison dart that found its mark. Dominic flinched, a visible tremor running through his powerful frame. He ran a hand through his perfect hair, messing it for the first time all evening. The mask was gone. In its place was raw, cornered panic. "Sienna, listen to me." He started taking a step towards her. "We can fix this. It's a complication, that's all. It's a problem that money can solve." His words, meant to be reassuring, were gasoline on a raging fire. "A problem that money can solve," she repeated, a bitter, humorless laugh escaping her lips. "Is that what this is to you, Dominic? A line item on a balance sheet, a business deal gone wrong. You think you can write a check and make a baby disappear?" "Of course not. I just mean she can be taken care of. There are arrangements that can be made. She'll be compensated. She'll be comfortable. She'll sign whatever we need her to sign. It will be discreet." He was thinking aloud, his mind already spinning through the logistics of damage control, of burying a secret so deep it would never see the light of day. Sienna stared at him, a profound sense of revulsion washing over her. He wasn't talking about a woman or a child. He was talking about an inconvenience to be managed, a liability to be mitigated. "Her name is Chloe, Sienna," said the name, feeling like shards of glass in her mouth. "Chloe Duval. She's a model, or was before she met you. From Montreal. She's 26 years old. She likes vintage champagne and has a penchant for Cartier love bracelets. You bought her one last Christmas." Dominic's face went white. "How? Did you really think I was that stupid?" Sienna's voice was laced with contempt. "Did you think I was just a pretty docile accessory you could hang jewels on while you lived another life? I've known about her for months, Dominic. I have copies of the credit card bills, the hotel receipts, the flight manifests. I have it all." She had been gathering the information methodically, a secret act of self-preservation, though until this moment she hadn't known what she would do with it. It had been her own little secret, a shield against the finality of the truth. Dominic's mind raced. This was worse than he thought. It wasn't just an overheard phone call. This was a calculated campaign. His wife, the woman he had always considered so beautifully pliable, had been building a case against him. "Why didn't you say anything?" he asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Because I was a fool," she said, her composure cracking for a moment as a wave of genuine pain washed over her. "Because I believed you when you said you would end it. Because I thought our child, our son," she emphasized the words with venom, "would be enough to make you a husband and a father. I thought he would be enough to make you a decent human being. I was wrong." Her baby kicked again, a sharp, insistent reminder of the life she was carrying. Her life. Her son. Her hand went to her belly, a fiercely protective gesture. The fight was no longer just for her own dignity. It was for her child's future, his birthright, his identity. Dominic's phone buzzed again. This time the sound was an obscenity in the charged atmosphere. Both of their heads snapped towards the phone, lying on the side table. Chloe's name glowed on the screen. "Don't you dare answer that," Sienna warned, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. But Dominic, driven by a desperate need to regain some semblance of control, snatched it up. "I have to handle this," he hissed, turning his back on her and walking towards the panoramic window as if the glittering cityscape could offer him an escape. "Chloe, stop calling," he muttered into the phone. "Now is not the time." Sienna stood up. The room felt too small, the air too thin. She walked towards the bar, her movements deliberate. She poured herself a glass of water, her hand surprisingly steady. She was watching Dominic, observing him with a chilling detachment. He was pacing his back to her, a caged tiger snarling into the phone. "I don't care what you think, it's complicated. No, you don't understand. Just give me some time to think time." That was the one thing Sienna knew they didn't have. An idea cold and sharp as a shard of ice began to form in her mind. It was a terrible, reckless idea born of desperation and a burning need for justice. Dominic finally ended the call, slamming the phone down on the marble bar top with a loud crack. He turned to face her, his expression a mixture of fury and desperation. "It's a mess, Sienna, a complete and utter mess. But I will fix it. I promise you I will fix it." "There is no fixing this, Dominic," she said calmly, taking a sip of water. "There is only what happens next." He looked at her, puzzled by her strange serenity. "What does that mean?" "It means you have a choice to make," she said, setting the glass down. "You have 2 women pregnant with your children. You have to decide which future you want. The one with me, your wife, the mother of your legitimate heir, living the life you've so carefully constructed. Or the one with her." Dominic stared at her relief beginning to flood his features. He thought this was a negotiation, an ultimatum he could win. He had misjudged her completely. "There's no choice, Sienna. It's you. It has always been you." "She means nothing. The baby, it's a mistake. A biological accident. We'll make it go away." "Make the baby go away." Sienna's eyes widened in feigned shock. "You mean an abortion, if that's what it takes?" "She'll do it. For the right price, she'll do anything." He spoke with the cold certainty of a man who believed every person had a price tag. "I see," Sienna said softly. She walked towards him, her gaze holding his. She reached up and touched his cheek, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. For a moment, Dominic thought he saw a glimmer of the old Sienna, the forgiving wife. He leaned into her touch, a desperate man clinging to a lifeline. "You're right, my love." She whispered, her voice a seductive purr that mirrored his own. "It's a terrible mess, and you must be so stressed." She straightened his tie, her movements fluid and intimate. "You need to handle this, in person." He was caught off guard. "What?" "Go to her." Sienna said, her eyes boring into his. "Go to her now. Tell her what you've decided. Tell her about the arrangement. Tell her it's over. Tell her you are choosing your wife and your real family. You need to be firm, Dominic. You need to end this tonight. For good." The suggestion was so audacious, so contrary to what he expected, that he was momentarily speechless. He had anticipated a night of tears, recriminations, and slammed doors. Instead, his wife was sending him into the arms of his mistress. You want me to go see her? Now?" "Yes," Sienna said, her voice unwavering. "I need to know it's done. I need to hear it from you when you come back, that it is unequivocally over. No more calls, no more secrets. Then and only then can we begin to figure out what's next for us." It was a masterstroke of psychological manipulation. She was giving him a way out, a clear path to redemption that he had to walk himself. She was empowering him to fix the problem, making him believe it was his own decisive action. Dominic, blinded by his own arrogance and desperate to salvage his perfect life, saw it as a sign of her strength, her pragmatism. He saw it as a victory. "You're right," he said, his confidence surging back. "You're absolutely right. I'll go now. I'll end it. Cleanly. Finally." He grabbed his keys and his wallet from the hall table. He turned to her before leaving his eyes filled with a new, profound respect. "Thank you, Sienna. You are stronger than I ever gave you credit for." He kissed her on the forehead, a gesture of finality, and walked out the door. The moment the lock clicked shut, Sienna's facade crumbled. She leaned against the wall, gasping for air, her body shaking. She had sent her husband to his mistress. It was the most painful, self-destructive thing she had ever done. But it was also the first move in her own game. She walked quickly to the study, her mind racing. She grabbed her own phone and a small, sophisticated listening device she had bought weeks ago, a purchase made in a moment of paranoid foresight. She had never used it, had hoped she would never have to. With trembling fingers, she dialed a number she knew by heart, the number of a private investigator she had consulted with months ago, a man named Marco. Marco. "It's Sienna Vance," she said, her voice urgent and low. "It's happening. Dominic is on his way to her apartment right now. 113B, Horatio Street, West Village. I need you there. I need everything. Audio, video, if you can get it. Don't be seen. Just get it all." She hung up and took a deep, shuddering breath. She had sent her husband to end his affair, but she had also sent a witness to document the fallout. She had no illusions that Dominic's conversation with a desperate, pregnant Chloe would be neat or clean. It would be brutal, and Sienna wanted a record of every single word. She was no longer a victim. She was a strategist, and this war was far from over. The 45 minutes that followed Dominic's departure were the longest of Sienna's life. The cavernous penthouse, usually a symbol of security and status, felt like a pressure cooker. Every tick of the clock was a hammer blow against her sanity. She paced the length of the marble hallway, a caged animal, waiting for news from the front lines of her own war. Her mind replayed the overheard conversation, the name Chloe, the word pregnant, a torturous loop of betrayal. Finally, her phone vibrated. It was a secure message from Marco. "Target acquired. JV just entered the building. I have audio. Stand by." Sienna's breath hitched. She sank onto the edge of a cold leather armchair, her phone clutched in a white-knuckled grip. This was it, the point of no return. Marco was a professional, a former NYPD detective with a reputation for discretion and results. If anyone could get her what she needed, it was him. A few agonizing minutes later, a second message arrived. It was an audio file. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she pressed play. She put the phone to her ear, the world shrinking to the tinny, distorted sounds coming from the speaker. First, the sound of a door opening. Then Chloe's voice, sharp and laced with a desperate hope. "Dominic, I knew you'd come. I told you it was important." Then Dominic's voice, cold and devoid of any warmth. "We need to talk, Chloe. Talk. That's all you have to say. I just told you I'm carrying your child, and you want to talk." There was the sound of a sob, a calculated performance, a vulnerability that Sienna could see in her mind's eye. "Let's be clear." Dominic's voice cut through the static. "This situation is a problem I intend to solve tonight." Sienna listened, her stomach churning, as Dominic laid out his terms. He was brutal, efficient, and utterly heartless. He spoke of a generous severance, a one-time payment that would require her to sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement and disappear from his life forever. He never once used the word baby. He referred to it only as the complication. "You want me to get rid of it?" Chloe's voice was a shocked whisper. "You're asking me to have an abortion. I'm not asking you to do anything," Dominic corrected her smoothly. "I'm offering you a choice. You can have a future of struggle, a single mother with no prospects, or you can accept my offer and have a future of financial security. The choice is yours. But either way, you will not be a part of my life." There was a long, heavy silence. Sienna held her breath. She was counting on Chloe's desperation on her volatile nature. She didn't disappoint. "You bastard!" Chloe's shriek was so loud, Sienna had to pull the phone away from her ear. "You think you can just buy me off? You think you can erase me? Erase us? I loved you, Dominic, and this baby is a part of you. It's a biological consequence of a mistake," Dominic said, his voice like ice. "A mistake I am now rectifying." Then came the part that made Sienna's blood run cold, the part that changed the entire game. "You want to talk about mistakes?" Dominic Chloe's voice dropped, becoming low and venomous. "Let's talk about your wife. The perfect, pristine Sienna. Did you ever wonder why she hasn't given you a child until now? After 3 years of marriage to a man obsessed with having an heir." "Leave Sienna out of this," Dominic snapped. "Oh, I think she's very much a part of this," Chloe sneered. "You see, I did a little digging. A woman has to protect her interests after all. It's amazing what you can find when you know where to look. Do the names Dr. Alistair Finch and the Westchester Fertility Clinic mean anything to you?" Sienna's world stopped. A wave of dizziness washed over her, so intense she had to grip the arms of the chair to keep from falling. How could she possibly know that the Westchester Fertility Clinic was Sienna's deepest, most painful secret? It was a secret she had kept even from Dominic. After a year of trying to conceive naturally, with no success, she had gone to the clinic, terrified of being seen as flawed or inadequate in her husband's eyes. The diagnosis had been devastating, diminished ovarian reserve. The chances of her conceiving naturally were almost zero. The baby she was carrying now was a miracle of modern science, the result of a grueling, emotionally draining, and incredibly expensive IVF journey. She had funded herself by secretly selling off jewelry Dominic had given her. "I don't know what you're talking about." Dominic's voice was tight, but Sienna could hear the seed of uncertainty Chloe had planted. "Don't you?" Chloe's laugh was triumphant. "Ask her, Dominic. Ask your precious wife about her little secret. Ask her why she was so desperate to get pregnant right when you started pulling away. Maybe her baby isn't the miracle you think it is. Maybe it's just a very, very smart career move." The audio file ended there. Sienna sat in stunned silence, the phone slipping from her fingers and clattering onto the marble floor. Chloe hadn't just exposed the affair. She had detonated a bomb in the very foundation of Sienna's life. She had taken Sienna's most private pain and twisted it into a weapon. The betrayal was so profound, so multi-layered, it was hard to comprehend. Dominic had betrayed her with his body. Chloe had betrayed her with this malicious, calculated revelation. But in a strange, twisted way, Sienna felt she had also betrayed herself by hiding the truth from Dominic in the first place. Her desire to be the perfect wife to meet his impossible standards had created the very vulnerability Chloe was now exploiting. The sound of the key in the front door made her jump. Dominic was back. She stood up, her body moving on autopilot. She smoothed down her dress, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. When Dominic walked in, he looked drained but victorious. He saw her standing there, calm and composed, and a look of relief washed over his face. "It's done," he announced, his voice raw. "It's over. She was difficult. But she'll take the money. It's finished." He walked towards her, his arms outstretched, expecting to be welcomed back into the fold, his sins absolved. But Sienna took a step back. "Is it Dominic?" she asked, her voice quiet. "Is it really finished?" He frowned, confused by her retreat. "Yes. I told you I would handle it." "You handled Chloe," she said, her eyes locking onto his. "But you didn't handle the truth, did you?" A flicker of apprehension crossed his face. "What are you talking about?" "While you were gone," Sienna said, her voice gaining strength, "I had some time to think. About us, about our marriage, and about all the secrets we've been keeping from each other." She let the words hang in the air, a deliberate echo of the accusation he had just faced. "Dominic?" she said, her tone shifting from accusation to a soft, almost pleading vulnerability. It was a performance worthy of an Oscar. "There's something I should have told you a long time ago. Something I was too scared to tell you." She saw the suspicion in his eyes, the seed Chloe had planted already taking root. He was waiting for the confession Chloe had primed him for. I wasn't sure I could ever give you a child," Sienna whispered, forcing tears to well in her eyes. "We tried for so long, and nothing happened. I was so scared you would leave me, that I wasn't enough." Dominic's expression softened slightly. This was not what he was expecting. He was expecting a confession of deceit, not a confession of fear. "So I did something," she continued, her voice breaking. "I went to a clinic, the Westchester Fertility Clinic." She saw his jaw tighten at the name. He knew. "It was my secret, my shame," she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "I went through IVF, Dominic, all by myself. I paid for it with the jewelry you gave me. I wanted to give you this baby so badly to save us that I did it behind your back. This baby," she touched her stomach, "our son. He's from a donor." The lie was monumental, a stroke of pure, desperate genius. It was a lie built on the foundation of Chloe's truth, but twisted into something new, something far more explosive. She had taken Chloe's accusation that the baby was a calculated move and confirmed it in the most devastating way possible. Dominic stared at her, his face a mask of disbelief. The color drained from his cheeks. The one thing in his life he believed was pure. The one thing that was unequivocally his heir, his legacy, was suddenly a lie. A donor. He choked out the word, his voice barely a whisper. "You're telling me the baby is not mine?" "I'm so sorry, Dominic," she wept. "I was going to tell you, I swear I was. I was just so afraid." He stumbled backward, his hand gripping the back of a chair for support. The triumphant victor, who had walked through the door just minutes ago, was gone. In his place was a man whose entire world had just been obliterated. His wife's infidelity was one thing. He could understand that, even control it. But this was a betrayal of his bloodline, his very essence. He looked at her swollen belly, and his eyes were filled with a terrifying, cold rage. The penthouse, once a symbol of his power, now felt like the stage for his ultimate humiliation. Sienna watched him, her heart pounding. She had gambled everything on this one audacious lie. She had sacrificed the truth of her own son's paternity to reclaim her power. She had taken the war to a new, unforeseen battlefield. And as she looked at the shattered man in front of her, she knew one thing for certain: the unraveling had just begun. The days following Sienna's earth-shattering lie were suspended in a strange, toxic silence. The penthouse, once a stage for their perfect life, transformed into a mausoleum. They were ghosts haunting the same opulent halls, their presence a constant, chilling reminder of the wreckage between them. Dominic had retreated to the guest wing, the heavy doors serving as a barricade against the woman he now saw as a complete stranger. He became a creature of the night, fueled by rage and paranoia. Sienna would lie awake, listening to the muffled sounds of his fury seeping from beneath his study door, low guttural phone calls to his legal team, the sharp, percussive tapping of his keyboard as he tore through digital rabbit holes. He was hunting for the phantom donor, the faceless man who had, in Dominic's mind, cuckolded him. Sienna had created a ghost, and now her husband was trying to exorcise it with brute financial force. The irony was not lost on her. Her lie had given his anger a focus, a tangible target, and for now that kept her and the true paternity of her son safe in the shadows of his obsession. But Sienna was not naive. This was a temporary ceasefire in a war she was determined to win. Dominic was a predator, and a cornered predator was unpredictable. Once his hunt for the non-existent donor proved fruitless, his rage would need a new target. It would turn back to her, and it would be merciless. She had to move, and she had to move now. She had to forge a weapon before he could forge one against her. And a weapon required an ally, even if that ally was the person she despised most in the world. It took 3 days of careful, clandestine planning. Using a newly purchased burner phone, she sent a single, untraceable text message. "We have a mutual acquaintance and a mutual problem. A coffee shop in Dumbo. Friday, 10 a.m., come alone." When Chloe Duvall slid into the vinyl booth of the waterfront cafe, she was almost unrecognizable. The vixen from the tabloids, the confident model who dripped glamour, was gone. In her place was a woman hollowed out by fear. Dark circles bruised the skin under her eyes. Her fiery red hair was scraped back in a messy bun, and the designer handbag she clutched seemed like a relic from another life. The severance package Dominic had spoken of had never materialized. He had cut her off financially and emotionally the second Sienna had presented him with a greater, more intimate betrayal. Chloe's eyes, filled with hostility, met Sienna's across the table. "What do you want?" Her voice was brittle, stripped of its seductive purr. Sienna took a deliberately slow sip from her cup, projecting a calm she did not feel. She had rehearsed this moment, knowing that the first few words would determine everything. "Hello, Chloe. I'm not here to discuss what I want. I think the more pressing question is, what do we want?" The use of "we" was a calculated shock. Chloe scoffed a dry, humorless sound. "There is no we. You hate me. You're his wife." "Oh, I do hate you." Sienna conceded, her voice a flat, emotionless razor. "Let's be perfectly clear about that. You slept with my husband. You weaponized my most private pain in a pathetic attempt to secure your own position. On a personal level, I find you reprehensible." She paused, letting the brutal honesty land. But my feelings are a luxury we can no longer afford. What is relevant, what is the only thing that matters now, is that we share a common enemy. A man who will crush us both without a second thought if we let him. Chloe stared, her defenses momentarily short-circuited by Sienna's frankness. She had expected tears threats, maybe a slap. She had not expected a business proposal. His name is Dominic Sienna, stated as if closing a deal. And he has played us both for absolute fools. He used your body for his entertainment and was ready to pay you to eliminate your child when you became inconvenient. He used my devotion as a cover for his deceits. We are two sides of the same worthless coin to him. We are his victims. Victims. Chloe's laugh was sharp and bitter. Look at you. You're still Sienna Vance. You're still living in that palace dripping in diamonds. I'm 2 weeks from being thrown out of my apartment. For now, Sienna said, her voice dropping as she leaned forward, her intensity creating a private conspiratorial bubble around their table. You are looking at this all wrong. You see my penthouse, but I see a prison I'll soon be evicted from. He's looking at me right now, and seeing the mother of another man's child. Do you have any idea what a man like Dominic Vance does to people who commit what he sees as the ultimate betrayal? He doesn't just divorce them. He annihilates them. He will use his fortune to ensure I am left with nothing. He will leak stories to the press, painting me as a cheating, unstable, gold-digging whore to prove I'm an unfit mother. He will take my son from me not out of love, but out of spite. He will grind my name, my reputation, and my spirit into dust. The grim, detailed prophecy hung in the air. The color drained from Chloe's face as the truth of Sienna's words resonated with her own experiences of Dominic's ruthlessness. And you, Sienna, pressed her eyes, boring into Chloe's. You are carrying his actual biological child, his heir. Right now you are a footnote because he's consumed by my infidelity. But what happens when he's done destroying me? He'll remember you. He will come for you. His lawyers will swarm you, force a paternity test, and then the real nightmare begins. He will offer you a pittance for your silence, and if you refuse, he'll drag you through a brutal custody battle. He'll use every secret you ever told him, every mistake you ever made, to prove you are nothing more than a degenerate tramp trying to cash in. He will take your baby, Chloe, and you will be left with nothing. She let the silence stretch, allowing the full weight of their shared, terrifying future to settle. They were trapped, two different women, caught in the same steel jaws. We are in the exact same boat, Sienna concluded softly. He wants to erase us. He wants to erase our children. Unless we work together. Chloe was silent for a full minute, her gaze lost somewhere over Sienna's shoulder, seeing the bleak future laid out before her. An alliance with her sworn enemy. It was insane. It was unthinkable. And it was, she realized with a sickening lurch, her only conceivable path to survival. What kind of alliance, she finally whispered. A wave of relief, cold and sharp, washed over Sienna. The hook was set. First she began, her voice crisp and businesslike, her plan already fully formed. You need to vanish. Not forever. Just long enough for him to believe you've given up. He's expecting you to become a problem. To be hysterical, to keep calling to sue. We will do the opposite of what he expects. She reached into her handbag and slid a thick, discreet manila envelope across the table. There's cash in there. $20,000. It's a start. Enough to break your lease rent, a quiet, furnished apartment out of the city. Somewhere in Connecticut, maybe. I want you to go dark. No social media. A new phone number. I will be your one and only point of contact. Chloe stared at the envelope as if it were a bomb. Her hand trembled as she reached out to touch it. You're giving this to me. After what I did, I am not giving it to you, Sienna corrected her, her voice like ice. I am investing it. I am investing in time. His assumption that you have been dealt with will buy us the time we need to gather our ammunition. Ammunition. What ammunition? Leverage, Sienna said, and for the first time, a dangerous, predatory glint sparked in her own eyes. She was starting to sound like Dominic, and the thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. Real leverage, the kind that matters to a man like him. I don't care about his affairs. They're a symptom, not the disease. I'm talking about the kind of information that can dismantle his empire from the inside out. Remember the St. Regis project, the greased palms. I want to know whose palms how much and where the receipts are. I want every dirty zoning variance, every shell corporation he uses to hide assets, every illegal corner he has ever cut to build his precious kingdom. She leaned in even closer, her voice barely a whisper. He trusted you, Chloe. In his own sick way, you were his confessor. He would get drunk or high on a new victory, and he would brag. What did he tell you in those moments? When his guard was down, names, deals, off-hand comments. Think, Chloe. Your future and your child's future depends on what you can remember. A flicker of comprehension ignited in Chloe's tired eyes. He had bragged, constantly, about his own cleverness, about the idiocy of his rivals, about the pliability of powerful men. She had been his ego's sounding board. There were things, Chloe said slowly, her mind starting to work to sift through the months of pillow talk and arrogant monologues. Names I didn't know. He talked about a city councilman, O'Malley. Michael O'Malley. Said the guy had a weakness for the ponies and that it had made the zoning for his new Hell's Kitchen tower remarkably simple. Sienna's lips curved into the faintest, coldest of smiles. Good, she said. That's a very good start. The unholy alliance was forged right there in the shared fire of their mutual desperation. In the weeks that followed, a silent, deadly campaign began. From a secluded cottage in rural Connecticut, Chloe became a ghost in the machine, feeding Sienna fragments of memory via encrypted texts. A name here, a whispered deal there. Sienna in turn became the general collating the information and feeding it to Marco, her private investigator. Marco, a man who thrived in the shadows, began to pull on the threads, and they started to unravel, revealing a tapestry of bribery, fraud, and corruption that was more rotten and sprawling than either woman had ever imagined. Meanwhile, the Cold War in the penthouse was escalating toward a breaking point. Dominic's failure to find a single shred of evidence of a sperm donor was driving him into a state of volatile madness. The lack of an answer was, to his conspiratorial mind, proof of an even more elaborate deception. He started seeing plots everywhere. One morning, he fired their housekeeper of 5 years, accusing her of being Sienna's spy. He'd look at Sienna's belly with a mixture of revulsion and confusion, a man staring at a puzzle he could not solve. The final detonation came on a grey, rain-swept Tuesday afternoon. Sienna was in the nursery, the one room in the apartment that still felt like a sanctuary, calmly folding a tiny cashmere sweater. The door was thrown open with such force that it slammed against the wall, and Dominic stormed in. His face was a mask of crimson fury, his eyes bloodshot and wild. He brandished a thick file like a weapon. "I know what you did," he hissed, his voice a venomous rasp. Sienna's heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced herself to look up at him, her face a placid mask. "I'm not sure what you mean. Dominic." "The clinic," he roared, flinging the file with all his might. Papers exploded across the room, scattering over the crib and the changing table like toxic confetti. "I've had the best white-collar investigators in the country on this for weeks. There is no donor. There is no secret IVF payment. There is no record of you at all. There is nothing. Then perhaps your investigators aren't as good as you think." Sienna replied, her voice an infuriating whisper of calm. "No." He lunged across the room, closing the distance between them in 2 massive strides. His presence was huge, menacing. "It means you lied. It means you concocted this whole insane, elaborate story, just to torture me. But why? If there was no donor, then what is the truth? Sienna, tell me the truth." He grabbed her by her upper arms, his fingers digging into her flesh with bruising force. For the first time, Sienna felt a primal spike of fear. She had goaded the beast for too long, and now it was turning on her. This was it, the endgame. "The truth," she said, allowing a tremor to enter her voice, her eyes holding his. "You really want the truth, Dominic?" She took a deep, shuddering breath. It was time to play her final, most dangerous card. It was a lie of such breathtaking audacity that it could either save her or destroy her in a single instant. "The truth," she said, her voice dropping to a dramatic, tragic whisper, "is that the baby isn't yours. You're right about that. But it's not from a donor either." Dominic stared, his furious mind struggling to compute this new variable. What are you saying?" Sienna's gaze shifted past him, a small, sad, self-deprecating smile touching her lips. It was a masterful performance of a broken woman confessing her deepest shame. "I'm saying," she said, her voice filled with a hollow, tragic finality, "that I did what you did, Dominic. I had an affair. It was the ultimate gambit, a confession of infidelity." She was handing him the moral high ground on a silver platter, giving him the perfect, unimpeachable reason to divorce her, shame her, and take everything she had, including their child. It was a move that looked to all the world like complete and utter surrender. But it wasn't. It was checkmate, and he had just walked right into it. That was a roller coaster of emotions, wasn't it? A story of deceit, betrayal, and 2 women who decided to fight back against the powerful man who tried to ruin them. But the battle is far from over. Will their risky alliance hold? And what will Dominic do now that he believes both women have betrayed him with rival heirs? The ultimate confrontation is coming, and trust me, you won't want to miss how this jaw-dropping story ends. If you are on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button and share this video with someone who loves a good drama. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you're the first to know when the final explosive part drops. Your support means everything, and it allows me to keep bringing you stories like this. Thanks for listening.